Hi guys, this is the Cabbage group. I'm Gantian Chen. Cabbage Island in New South Wales, Australia, suffered a severe flooding disaster in February 2022, a disaster that posed serious challenges to local residents and rescue workers. Our survey presentation will be divided into 4 parts. I will first present the causes, characteristics, impacts, and government response to this disaster. This will be followed by framework analysis by Annabelle, followed by Ulander and Jet's analysis of the site and the residents, respectively. First, the flooding on Cabbage Island was caused by extreme weather conditions. Flooding is the result of a low-pressure system that passes through areas of cooler air in the atmosphere that are higher, thus destabilizing the atmosphere and allowing moisture to be lifted and fall as rain. During February 2022, the area received much higher than normal rainfall, over 600 millimeters, which caused the river level to rise and overtopped the local levees. In addition, the wind speed was extremely high, reaching over 67 kilometers per hour, leading to even more raging water and causing even more disaster damage. From a topographical point of view, we can find that the Richmond River flows from south to north, which means that the local residents, whose southern part is the main residential area, were unprepared to be flooded when the flood first came. We can look at this model. This side is the south side and the top is the north side. This mainland area on the left is a little bit higher. The other 2 islands are also a bit higher, while Cabbage Island is shorter and flatter. So when the water rises, the island is more prone to flooding. The flooding disaster had a severe impact on local residents and rescue workers. Across the whole Queensland and New South Wales flood disaster, 13 people lost their lives. Of the 26 buildings on Cabbage Island, including the local public school, all were deemed inhabitable due to the damage caused by flood, and today still cannot be accessed due to mold and health and safety risks. Flood waters reached 16 meters high, and over 20 cars were also destroyed. Reports from Australian National Emergency Management Agency in 2023 showed that Cabbage Island was completely submerged at one point during the flood, and all residents had to be evacuated. The only bridge connecting the area to outside mainland was damaged, and the flooding completely cut off electricity in this area, causing great difficulties in evacuation, rescue, and rehabilitation efforts. As we can see from the pictures, despite the small population of inhabitants, every person living and working on the island was severely impacted, and their lives continue to be impacted to this day. The local government and rescue workers did take a series of measures in order to cope with this disaster, but there are indications of unfair treatment due to cultural differences and discrimination. The SES and Jellyland Council had a door-knocking process to notify residents and then used private hired vehicles to evacuate the community to nearby Waddell or Ballina. However, during this incident, they had less than 3 hours to evacuate the whole community, and reports of last-minute cancellation of vehicles and emergency housing, which Jellyland Council CEO Chris Finch believes is due to racial discrimination. The New South Wales government and first responders provided rescue equipment and supplies to ensure the basic needs of the residents. But for those refugees in the hotels and emergency centers near Ballina, they were faced with the same problem of not being able to continue living there for long periods of time. Since the disaster, many of them closed because they can't provide pro bono help on a permanent basis, despite there being limited alternate options to house Cabbage Island community. Jelly Local Aboriginal Land Council worked in collaboration with the Department of Communities and Justice to find long-term accommodation for the residents. Meanwhile, many are residing in demountable port homes, caravans, couch-surfing, or living in tents across Waddell and Ballina Shire. After floods passed, the Australian Defence Force and emergency services including the Rural Fire Service and Ballina Shire Council, came to visit. But as you can imagine, this didn't really solve anything. In the long term, the Aboriginal people would ideally like to be able to return to their homes and land, but most important, remain together and connected with their families and community. The reconstruction of the houses is the main problem. As you can see from the picture, the houses now have some waterproofing, but it actually can't stop these 100-year floods. The government has set requirements that all new construction must meet flood-compatible materials, and for Cabbage Island in particular, their recommendation to not rebuild any new rest homes at all. One of the most important buildings on the island is Cabbage Island Public School, and that is set to take 18 to 24 months to rebuild. We found this document on the school's official website. However, in 2022, school children had moved in a temporary campus in Waddell, only 6 minutes away from Cabbage Island. All in all, the design of Cabbage Island was and still a daunting task to rebuild. My partner will continue to present our second research and some other investigations.
After deep research into the incident, the site and the community, there are a variety of frameworks and methodologies that need to be considered to guide our design practice. When selecting appropriate frameworks, we considered the nature of our emergency scenario, being a flood, the location of our chosen site, as well as frameworks made by and for Indigenous people, or those with First Nations interests put first. The Australian Disaster Preparedness Framework has been designed for catastrophic disasters. Given the extreme flood risk of the island, combined with the vulnerability of the island's inhabitants and the importance of appropriate cultural sensitivity, the Australian Disaster Preparedness Framework is appropriate to guide our design solution. These principles should be considered to ensure preparedness for any future disasters occurring on the island. All hazards, the solution should be designed to suit any hazards, particularly due to climate change. Borderless, the solution should not be restricted by state or territory boundaries. The 2022 floods in particular affected both Queensland and New South Wales. Simple, the preparedness solution should be easy to understand, learn, communicate and apply. Here, simplicity may be applied differently due to cultural and social factors of the First Nation people. Adaptable, the solution needs to be able to adapt to uncertainties of natural disasters. And timely. For the 2022 flood disaster in particular, there were multiple issues with timeliness which need to be better managed in an alternate critical responses. As Cabbage Tree Island is prone to flooding, a floodplain risk management plan has been developed by the SDES and Ballina Shire Council, which includes a series of recommendations. The recommended strategies include the construction of deflector levees on the southern end of the island, the prohibition of additional residential development, the enlarging of culverts beneath the Pacific Highway, improved flood warning protocols for the island, and a flood education program for the community. Pictured here is a plan for the placement of the levees and culverts on the island. Note that all the levees are on the southern end of the island, which is the area with the highest flood risk.
This is a physical model of the levees. We can see that the levees were built on south of the island on both sides. It's just a schematic. Then when the flood comes, the water will infiltrate to the sides preferentially. The height here is made to prevent a 10-year flood and 100-year flood respectively, but actually 2 depths are made on both sides.
However, according to the 2020 Living Planet Index for migratory freshwater fish, culverts affect and damage the habitat and life cycle of fish. As outlined in the soon-to-be-discussed Bundjalung Nation Flood Report, the damage to fish and marine life can be spiritually and culturally traumatising to local Indigenous cultures. Thus, the decision of implementing culverts need to be more carefully considered. Ballina Aboriginal Health Service services the Cabbage Tree Island community and is designed for local First Nations people, so their framework is suitable for guiding our design response. Notable framework points include the recognition of the centrality of kinship, the importance of respecting the complexity and the dynamics of kinship, extended family and community, impact of trauma and loss. Indigenous Australians have a traumatic history across multiple causes, including conflict, dispossession, loss of spirituality, destruction of land, racism, and in this particular context, the trauma of living through a natural disaster. All need to be carefully considered in the design solution. And finally, universal access to basic healthcare, housing and education. These are ongoing targets in Australia-wide Indigenous initiatives and are targets that should be implemented into this design solution. The next framework to guide our design response are the recommendations from the Bundjalung Nation Flood Report, prepared and submitted for the yet-to-be-published 2022 Independent Flood Inquiry. This framework is the most specific to the event, the location, and has Aboriginal people at the forefront. Some key points from the flood report that could be applied to a design response include First Nations knowledge and planning, that Aboriginal voices are heard, respected and considered in all emergency decision-making, long-term consideration of the environment and the river, consulting with Aboriginal knowledge, history and spirituality regarding environmental care, disaster plan for cultural heritage, that specific plans and considerations are put into place for significant cultural sites and those of high historical value, and the First Nation naming of disasters. Suggestions to refer to the affected areas by their First Nations country's name rather than post-colonial names, as well as other Indigenous terminology and language throughout the response. From all of these individual framework elements, there are successful applications of these globally that will inform our design solution. One case study is the Room for River program in the Netherlands. This solution essentially created more room for the Waal River in Nijmegen to overflow into control locations and at more controlled levels. The development included the construction of a bypass channel which diverts overflowing floodwaters into a new water park, as well as multiple new bridges, the relocation of levees, wetlands and nature development, and the development of a brand new island. This response is a great application of considering the environment and is also a larger scale thinking of installing levees and culverts. Another case study is the flood-resistant Brisbane ferry terminals, and they are a good application of such framework ideas. Like Cabbage Tree Island, Brisbane is also built on a floodplain and surrounds a major river and has suffered catastrophic floods. These ferry terminals won the 2017 Good Design Awards and are designed to withstand a 1 in 500 year flooding event. The terminals are designed to withstand rising river levels, and also, once the water reaches a critical point, will strategically detach in order to reduce river debris. They are also installed at optimal locations depending on river flows and depths. Technology and design like this in the context of Cabbage Tree Island could also provide a more secure method of evacuation given the unreliability of Backchannel Road. Finally, the Landcare Indigenous Land and Sea Management, or Caring for Country initiative and program, is a natural disaster solution that incorporates multiple of these principles. This program facilitates a number of programs to enable Indigenous-led and informed care for the environment, such as controlled burning and fire prevention and the management of water sources. It also incorporates a large number of framework key points that are previously outlined. Though not directly an architecture, product or landscape design solution, it is still an application of these framework principles and has the opportunity for a variety of design solutions, such as communication design, web design, UX, UI, and many more.
Next, I will conduct a site analysis looking at 4 specific perspectives: climate, topography, flora, fauna, and potential dangers. The Ballina area is temperate to mild subtropical climate, with temperatures ranging between 19 and 27 degrees Celsius. The month of September receives the least precipitation with only 42 millimeters of rain. But January has the largest rainfall, which is 142 millimeters. It is warmest in January and coldest in July. The Aborigines of Cabbage Tree Island follow their own cultural calendar. This cultural calendar is based on the changes in weather, flora, and fauna, and acts like a guide to help them navigate, understand, and enjoy the environment, as well as guide spiritual and cultural practices. However, at the same time, the climate also has negative impacts. Due to the abundance of mosquitoes during the rainy season, there is a risk of mosquito-borne viruses. Regarding the island's topography, Cabbage Tree Island is situated in a low-lying area, encircled by the Richmond River, and Wadale is the nearest town. Due to the island's flat terrain and the various rivers, and streams flowing from the nearby mountains to the Richmond River, the river's water level can quickly rise when there is severe rainfall. In addition, there are 26 buildings and a public school on the island. The only way to access Cabbage Tree Island is by a bridge connected to Backchannel Road on the island's west side. However, the bridge's deck has an average elevation of 3.1 MAHD, whilst the average elevation of Backchannel Road is between 1.3 and 2.4 MAHD. Once the flood water level exceeds the bridge and road elevation, residents can no longer use the bridge as an escape route. Fortunately, most families own at least one vehicle, and the state government also raised the low-lying part of Bacchanal Road in 2008 using grants from the Natural Disaster Mitigation Program to keep the road as clean as possible. Due to its temperate to mild subtropical climate, Cabbage Island is home to diverse ecosystems and a wide variety of flora and fauna. Cabbage Island growing thick fauna, including purple cherry trees, figs, and bangalow palms. The island has many migratory birds in winter, such as wattlebirds, lorikeets, and so on. However, the warming climate affects snakes to come out to feed, and tick breeding. Hence, potential hazards of people's outdoor activities began to rise. There are several potential dangers: thunderstorms, bushfires, rising sea levels, wild animal attacks, lack of accident routes due to flooding, potential injury from flood residue, damaged houses, and conflict amongst the residents over limited living resources. The island is currently uninhabitable due to the severe structural damage to the buildings and the presence of mold. Both factors are a very high risk to human health. Based on epidemiologic research, there is a relationship between exposure to wide indoor spaces and negative health effects. For this purpose, the design works with the shape of the line to build the floor of the house higher than the peak flood level, strengthen the stability of the house structure, and uses flame retardant and waterproof materials for the buildings.
Hello everyone, my name is Jade. Today I'm going to introduce inhabitant analysis. Cabbage Island is home to at 119 residents of people from the Benjalan Nation and Ningbo clan. A significant portion of these residents are children, with approximately 40 children enrolling at the local public school. However, due to the complex kinship structure within the island and the surrounding area, the total number of inhabitants in the island can influence to 230 people. Let's move on to next page. Although the Benjalan Nation covers a large area of Queensland and New South Wales, there are multiple sub-clans in each particular area. The Cabbage Island area is also managed by the Jellyland Council. The island has been home to the Aboriginal people of the Benjalan Nation from thousands of years and has great culture and spiritual. Conversely, an Aboriginal station, most members of the community on the island are young generation of the original inhabitants of the area, many of who are members of the Benjalan, Ningbo, and Jihobo clans. The community on Cabbage Island has a strong connection to their cultural heritage and practice traditional customs such as fishing, gathering, and storytelling. Across multiple primary and secondary sources, there is a recruiting themes of importance of community, family, and connection to country. Kinship is a complex but important aspect of First Nation society and culture, and is a practice that the Benjalan people of the island follow. There are multiple kinship subgroups which are organized by ancestor tutors and geography territorial. There is also a complex structure of marriage rules within their kinship structure. As mentioned, there is a strong connection to family and community, and the members of the island are often in households of up 12 people, including children. Let's move on to Aboriginal Health and Education Survey. This page has some specific dates about the Aboriginal inhabitants. Although there are limited results from the Cabbage Island, but this report can provide indication into the health and well-being of the island residents. The report indicates that the leading causes of disease amongst indigenous people in New South Wales are primarily mental and substance use disorders, followed by cardiovascular disease, injuries, and cancer. Indigenous people are more likely to have a high level of psychological distress than non-Indigenous people. And after traumatic events like 2022 follows, as well as other history traumas, it's likely still a significant health issue for the community. I put some line chart and bar chart to show this problem. At the final of this part, I find 3 factors that threaten the health of Aboriginal people: is smoking, drinking alcohol, and overweight. Let's move on to the education and employment part. According to the chart, Aboriginal people are less employed and less educated than other peoples. There are suggestions that the inhabitants on the island have a disadvantage to their education levels and surveys, especially after the COVID and the surge to the online learning, as well as the troubles with providing a local for the public school after the floods. Principal Dinah Anderson suggests her school is the top 5 of the most disadvantaged school in New South Wales, and not a single household had a reliable internet across for the online learning. Although we have achieved some results, we still need to continue to work hard. Here are some suggestions for improving the situation of Aboriginal people. Our report is basically over here. I would like to thank my team members, Annabelle, Great, and Yolanda, for your hard work and dedication. It's my honor to cooperate with you. Thanks to the instructors, Annabelle and Stephen, for taking us through this course. Thanks a lot.